In the cramped kitchen of her uncle's Kentucky home, a 24-year-old former nursing student was about to overhear the conversation that would shatter her world. What started as preparing for a job interview took a shocking turn when she came face to face with her Uncle Frank's brutal phone call. Beverly Thompson wasn't your typical unemployed graduate. For months, she had been a certified nursing assistant, known for her compassionate patient care. When she accidentally recorded Frank calling her dead weight to this family, Beverly discovered the catalyst that would transform her from grateful burden to empowered woman seeking independence. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Beverly's hands moved with practiced efficiency through the morning routine, each motion calculated to avoid the creaking floorboard near the kitchen sink. 5:30 a.m. meant Uncle Frank would be stirring soon, and the last thing she needed was to wake him before his coffee was ready. The ancient percolator gurgled to life as she measured out the grounds, not too strong. Frank complained it gave him heartburn, but not too weak either, or he'd grumble about watered-down swill all morning. The eggs came next, too over-easy. For Frank scrambled for Aunt Sharon, who'd emerge in her faded pink robe around 6:15 to fuss over Tyler's laundry before he headed back to Eastern Kentucky University. Beverly had memorized these rhythms over the past 6 months, learned to navigate the household's unspoken rules like a ship avoiding hidden reefs. She folded the last of Sharon's blouses with military precision, smoothing every wrinkle from the polyester fabric. The ironing board stood ready in the corner she'd tackle Frank's work shirts after breakfast, assuming the ancient iron didn't give out again. Everything had to be perfect. Perfect enough that maybe, just maybe, they'd forget for a moment that she was here because she had nowhere else to go. The laptop Tyler's old one passed down when he got his college upgrade sat waiting on the kitchen table. Beverly opened it carefully, wincing at the loose hinge that threatened to snap completely. The job search sites loaded slowly on the Williams basic internet plan, but she'd learned patience. Indeed Monster, the hospital system's website, bookmarked in a folder labeled Future that she'd created in a moment of desperate optimism. Christ, Beverly, you're up early again. Frank's voice cut through the morning quiet as he shuffled into the kitchen, work boots unlaced and hair standing at odd angles. His tone carried that particular edge of irritation that suggested her presence was somehow personally offensive. Don't you sleep? Just wanted to get breakfast started, she replied, her voice automatically dropping to the apologetic register she'd perfected. Coffee's almost ready. Frank grunted, settling into his chair with the heavy sigh of a man bearing great burdens. His eyes swept over the laptop screen before she could minimize the browser. Still playing around on that thing, huh? You know what they say about the definition of insanity? Beverly's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. She'd submitted 43 applications in 6 months. 43 rejections, or more often, the crushing silence of being ignored entirely. But she couldn't stop. Stopping meant admitting Frank was right about Heard, that she was exactly the failure he saw when he looked at her. There's a position at the medical center, she said, hating how hopeful she sounded. Administrative assistant in patient services. They want someone with healthcare experience. Healthcare experience? Frank's laugh was sharp. You mean that CNA thing? Beverly, you lasted, 8 months before they cut you loose? The coffee pot chose that moment to finish brewing, its final gurgle filling the silence. Beverly poured Frank's cup with steady hands, though something twisted painfully in her chest. 8 months, as if the budget cuts that eliminated her position were somehow her fault. As if she hadn't worked double shifts, covered for sick colleagues, earned praise from patients and supervisors alike before the state funding dried up. I was thinking, Beverly began, then stopped. Thinking, such a dangerous word in this house, implying she had ideas above her station. I was wondering if I could use you as a reference. Frank's spoon clinked against his coffee cup as he stirred in sugar. 1 spoonful, never 2. Beverly knew these details because knowing them was survival. A reference? Beverly, honey, what exactly would I say? That you're real good at folding laundry? That you can make a decent pot of coffee when you remember to clean the filter? The words landed like physical blows, each one carefully aimed. Beverly's track record, her reliability. The implication that asking for help was somehow presumptuous, entitled. She'd heard variations of this speech so many times she could recite it from memory. "I understand," Beverly said quietly, closing the laptop. The medical center position would require 3 professional references. Without Frank's help, she had Dr. Martinez from the clinic where she'd worked and maybe her old nursing instructor if she could work up the courage to call. Not enough? Never enough. Sharon appeared in the doorway, already dressed in her careful layers of cardigans and concern. "Morning, sweetie," she said to Beverly, but her eyes were on Frank, reading his mood, calculating the emotional weather for the day. "Tyler's got that big presentation today. I want to make sure his blue shirt is pressed just right." "Beverly's on it," Frank said, gesturing toward the ironing board. "She's got plenty of time, seeing as how she's not working today. Or tomorrow." Or Frank. Sharon's voice carried a gentle warning, but she didn't look at Beverly when she said it, never looked directly at the discomfort she was witnessing. "Beverly does plenty around here. Sure she does." Frank's tone shifted, becoming conversational, reasonable. The kind of voice that made you question your own perceptions. "She pulls her weight, don't you, Beverly?" There it was. The phrase that had become Beverly's personal anthem of inadequacy. Pull your weight, as if her worth could be measured in household chores and invisible labor. As if the months of applications, interviews, and rejections were somehow evidence of laziness rather than a grinding economic reality that had chewed up half the town's workforce. Beverly began clearing the breakfast dishes, each movement automatic. The eggs had gone cold on her own plate. She'd forgotten to eat again, too. Focused on serving others. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but asking for seconds when Frank was in this mood felt dangerous. Better to wait until lunch, grab something when no one was watching. "I'll get Tyler's shirt," she said, retreating toward the laundry room. The iron was still warm from yesterday's load. She set to work on the blue Oxford that would help her cousin make a good impression in his business communications class. Tyler, who was building a future. Tyler, who had options. She was smoothing the collar when footsteps approached. Tyler himself, hair damp from the shower, looking uncomfortable in the way that had become familiar whenever his parents discussed Beverly's situation. "Morning," he said quietly, glancing toward the kitchen where Frank's voice was rising in animated conversation with Sharon about production quotas at the factory. "Dad being, you know," Beverly nodded, not trusting her voice. Tyler was. A good kid young man, really, though she still thought of him as the 12-year-old who'd built elaborate Lego cities while she'd helped with his math homework during family visits. Before her world collapsed. Before she became the family burden, instead of the cousin who'd once seemed destined for nursing school and a stable future. "Hey," Tyler said, fumbling in his wallet. "I got some cash from my campus job. You need gas money or anything?" He held out a $20 bill, folded small and discreet. Parents don't need to know, right? Kindness was almost worse than Frank's cruelty. At least Frank's contempt was honest, uncomplicated. Tyler's generosity came wrapped in guilt and secrecy, a reminder that even the people who cared about her saw her as a problem to be managed rather than a person with potential. "Thanks," Beverly whispered, accepting the money because her gas tank was nearly empty, and pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "I'll pay you back when, don't?" Tyler's voice was firm. "Just don't give up, okay? I know Dad's hard on you, but you're smart. You're good at stuff. This situation isn't permanent." Beverly nodded, hanging the pressed shirt on Tyler's door handle. Permanent. The word echoed in her mind as she returned to the kitchen, where Sharon was expressing concern about grocery money, and Frank was explaining, with exaggerated patience, that money didn't grow on trees. "Speaking of pulling weight," Sharon said, her voice carrying that particular tone of forced lightness that meant criticism was coming. "We're running low on everything again. I swear that grocery budget just disappears faster every week." Beverly looked up from wiping down the counter, catching the meaningful glance between Frank and Sharon. The implication was clear enough. It's an extra mouth to feed, an extra body using utilities, taking up space. Never mind that Beverly ate sparingly, took quick showers, kept her few possessions confined to the small guest room that had become her temporary boot, not temporary home. "I can pick up some groceries," Beverly offered. "When I go out for—" She stopped. When she went out for what? job interviews that wouldn't materialize, errands that could justify burning Tyler's gas money. That'd be helpful, Sharon said, already turning away. Maybe just the basics. Nothing fancy, nothing fancy. Like the name brand cereal Tyler preferred, or the expensive coffee Frank drank on weekends. Basic meant generic brands, careful portions. The constant calculation of worth versus cost that had become Beverly's existence. She reopened the laptop, determined to submit at least 3 more applications before the day ended. The medical center position still glowed on her screen, requiring qualifications she possessed but couldn't prove, references she couldn't provide, confidence she'd lost somewhere between the budget cuts and the eviction notice, and the slow, grinding realization that the nursing degree she'd worked so hard toward was slipping away one missed payment at a time. But she typed anyway. Crafted cover letters that painted her employment gap as a period of skill development and family care rather than the financial catastrophe it had been. Highlighted her CNA training, her patient advocacy experience, the way she'd once been. Trusted with people's lives and well-being before becoming someone who couldn't even trust herself to deserve a roof over her head. The morning light crept across the kitchen table as Beverly worked, the household settling into its daily rhythms around her, Frank's truck rumbling to life in the driveway, Sharon's morning talk shows filtering in from the living room, Tyler gathering his textbooks and offering Beverly a quick, sympathetic smile before heading to his car. 3 applications submitted. 3 more chances for rejection or silence. But also 3 more possibilities that someone might see past the gap in her employment history to the person she'd been before. The person she was still trying to remember how to be. Beverly closed the laptop and began planning her grocery trip, mentally calculating how to stretch Tyler's $20 into a week's worth of basics. She would make it work. She always made it work. Even when making it work felt like drowning in slow motion, she would find a way to stay afloat. Because the alternative, admitting Frank was right about her, was a weight she couldn't bear to carry. Beverly closed the laptop and began planning her grocery trip, mentally calculating how to stretch Tyler's $20 into a week's worth of basics. She would make it work. She always made it work. Even when making it work felt like drowning in slow motion, she would find a way to stay afloat. The phone rang Tuesday morning at 9:47 a.m. Just as Beverly was scrubbing the burnt edges off Sharon's favorite casserole dish, the voice on the other end was crisp. Professional Maria Rodriguez from Cumberland Regional Medical Center, asking if Beverly could come in for an interview Thursday at 2 o'clock. Beverly's hand trembled as she wrote down the details, her penmanship deteriorating into barely legible scratches. "Yes, ma'am. I'll be there. Thank you so much for the opportunity." The words felt foreign in her mouth. Opportunity. When was the last time she'd used that word without irony? She hung up and stood in the kitchen, dish towel still clutched in her damp hands, afraid to move, afraid that motion might somehow undo this moment, reveal it as another cruel dream. The interview was real. Someone had looked at her application, her carefully crafted cover letter, her modest but genuine healthcare experience, and decided she was worth 30 minutes of their time. Who was that? Sharon appeared in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, eyes curious but guarded. The medical center. "They want to interview me Thursday." Sharon's face cycled through surprise, pleasure, and something that might have been worry. "Well, that's wonderful, honey. Really. You'll need something nice to wear." The observation hit like cold water. Beverly mentally inventoried her wardrobe. 3 pairs of jeans, various t-shirts and sweaters, 1 dress she'd worn to her cousin's wedding 2 years ago that was now too loose from stress-induced weight loss. "Nothing that screamed, 'Hire me for your professional medical facility. I'll figure something out,'" Beverly said, though the words felt hollow. Thrift stores required money she didn't have, and borrowing from Sharon would mean admitting inadequacy. In yet another area of her life. "Maybe we could," Sharon began, then stopped, glancing toward the living room where Frank's morning news program blared. "We'll figure something out." Beverly recognized the code. Sharon wanted to help but couldn't risk Frank's disapproval. The delicate mathematics of keeping peace in the household trumped genuine assistance every time. Thursday arrived with unseasonable warmth for October in Kentucky. Beverly had managed to construct an interview outfit from Sharon's closet, a navy blazer. It was slightly too large, and a white blouse that she'd pressed 3 times to achieve an acceptable level of crispness. The skirt came from her own limited wardrobe, paired with the 1 pair of professional shoes she'd managed to keep when she'd sold most of her belongings 6 months ago. Tyler had offered to drive her, appearing in the kitchen as Beverly attempted to tame her hair into something resembling professional composure. "Dad's at work, Mom's at her book club thing," he said. "Keys already in hand. Come on, I'll drop you off and pick you up after." The drive to Cumberland Regional took 23 minutes through winding country roads that Beverly had traveled dozens of times as a patient, visitor, and briefly as an employee at the affiliated clinic. Now she was seeing it differently, as a potential workplace, place where she might rebuild something resembling a career. "You nervous?" Tyler asked, navigating around a slow-moving pickup truck. "Terrified," Beverly admitted. The honesty felt dangerous and liberating simultaneously. "You're going to do great. I mean it." Tyler's voice carried conviction that Beverly couldn't quite summon for herself. "You're smart, you know healthcare stuff, and you actually care about helping people. That's more than most people can say." Beverly studied her cousin's profile as he drove. When had he grown up? When had the kid who'd needed help with algebra homework become someone offering wisdom and perspective she desperately needed? She said quietly. Tyler's jaw tightened. "My dad thinks a lot of things. Doesn't make them true." The medical center's parking lot was busier than Beverly had expected, filled with cars that represented the kind of stable employment she'd once taken for granted. She checked her reflection in Tyler's passenger mirror one final time, smoothing the borrowed blazer and praying her nervousness wasn't visible. "You've got this," Tyler said, as she gathered her purse and the folder containing copies of her resume, references, and certifications. "And Bev, whatever happens, you're not giving up, right?" The interview itself passed in a blur of questions about patient interaction, computer skills, and why she wanted to work in healthcare administration. Maria Rodriguez was exactly what Beverly had hoped, for professional but warm, asking follow-up questions that suggested genuine interest rather than mere politeness. "Your CNA experience shows you understand patient care from the ground up," Maria said, reviewing Beverly's resume. "That's a valuable perspective for administrative work. Many people in this field forget we're dealing with human beings, not just paperwork." Beverly found herself relaxing. Talking about her time at the clinic was something approaching the enthusiasm she'd once felt for the work. She described streamlining filing systems, comforting anxious patients, bridging communication gaps between doctors and families. For 30 minutes, she remembered who she'd been before circumstances reduced her to someone grateful for grocery money and a place to sleep. "We'd like to offer you the position," Maria said as the interview concluded. "It's entry-level, but there's room for growth. We believe in promoting from within. When people show initiative and dedication." Beverly accepted immediately, trying to maintain professional composure while her heart hammered against her ribs. A job. An actual job with regular hours, steady pay, and the possibility of rebuilding her professional identity. Tyler was waiting in the parking lot, textbook open on his dashboard, but his attention focused entirely on Beverly's face as she approached the car. "I got it," she said simply. His whoop of celebration was so enthusiastic that other people in the parking lot turned to look. "I knew it. I freaking knew it. When do you start?" "Monday." The word felt surreal. Monday. She would wake up and have somewhere to go, something meaningful to do, a reason to exist beyond household maintenance and job applications. The drive home was different from the morning's journey. Beverly watched the familiar landscape with new eyes, seeing possibility instead of limitation. She had a job. A real job that would provide income, purpose, and maybe eventually independence. Frank's truck was in the driveway when they arrived, meaning he'd come home early from his factory shift. Beverly's euphoria dimmed slightly. As they entered the house, where Frank sat at the kitchen table with a beer and a scowl, "Well?" he asked, his tone suggesting he expected disappointment. "I got the job," Beverly said, trying to match Tyler's earlier enthusiasm, but finding her voice smaller, more cautious in Frank's presence. "Huh." Frank took a long drink of his beer, darting when. "Monday." Full-time, regular hours good? Benefits package. Benefits, Frank repeated. That's assuming you stick with it this time. What was it you said about that clinic job, that it was going to be your fresh start? Beverly felt the familiar weight settling on her shoulders. Frank's skepticism working like gravity to pull her back down to earth. But for the first time in months, she found herself pushing against it. This is different, she said quietly. This is a real opportunity. Opportunity. Frank's laugh was short and sharp. Beverly, honey, you've been getting your hopes up for months now. Maybe it's time to be realistic about your situation. The word hung in the air like smoke. Situation, as if her unemployment, her financial instability, her presence in their home, was some kind of character flaw, rather than the result of circumstances largely beyond her control. But Beverly had a job now. Starting Monday, she would be Beverly Thompson, administrative assistant at Cumberland Regional Medical Center. Not Beverly the burden, Beverly the disappointment, Beverly who couldn't pull her weight. For the first time in months, she had something to hold on to when the weight of staying afloat threatened to drag her under. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October clarity that made everything seem possible. Beverly had a job now. Starting today, she would be Beverly Thompson, administrative assistant at Cumberland Regional Medical Center. Not Beverly the burden, Beverly the disappointment, Beverly who couldn't pull her weight. The week passed in a blur of training sessions, computer systems, and the overwhelming relief of having somewhere to be. Maria Rodriguez proved to be exactly the kind of supervisor Beverly had hoped for, demanding but fair. Quick to offer guidance when Beverly struggled with the hospital's electronic record system. Generous with praise when Beverly mastered a new task ahead of schedule. You're a natural at this, Maria said Friday afternoon as Beverly successfully processed a complex insurance authorization that had stumped the previous temporary worker. I had a good feeling about you from the interview. Beverly felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest, pride in her own competence, the satisfaction of work well done. She'd forgotten how it felt to be valued for her skills rather than tolerated as an obligation. At home, the dynamic remained carefully neutral. Frank acknowledged her employment with grudging approval, though his comments carried the constant implication that this success was temporary, fragile, likely to collapse at any moment. Sharon offered supportive smiles and asked polite questions about her workday, but Beverly sensed an underlying worry, as if Beverly's independence might somehow disrupt the household's delicate balance. Only Tyler seemed genuinely thrilled by her transformation. He called Wednesday evening from his dorm, wanting to hear every detail about her new responsibilities and the people she was meeting. You sound different, he said, happier, like you're remembering who you used to be. Beverly had been thinking the same thing. Each day at the medical center restored another piece of her professional identity, reminded her that she was capable of more than invisible household labor and apologetic gratitude. Friday night found her in the kitchen, preparing for her second week, while Frank watched television in the living room. She was reviewing patient privacy protocols when she realized she'd left her phone charger in her bedroom. The document was important. Maria expected all new employees to pass a HIPAA compliance test by Wednesday, so Beverly marked her place and headed toward the back of the house. The hallway stretched between the kitchen and bedrooms, passing the living room where Frank's chair was positioned with its back to the doorway. As Beverly approached, she heard his voice rising above the television's volume. He was on the phone, speaking with the casual certainty of someone who believed his conversation was private. I'm telling you, Mike, it's been 6 months of this. 6 months of her eating our food, using our utilities, giving us nothing but worry and embarrassment. Beverly froze in the hallway, her heart suddenly hammering against her ribs. Frank was talking about her. The realization hit with such force that she nearly gasped aloud. Sharon keeps making excuses, says we need to be patient, but patient with what? She's 24 years old, for Christ's sake. When I was 24, I was working 2 jobs and supporting a family. Beverly pressed herself against the wall, afraid to move forward or backward, afraid that any motion might give away her presence. Her phone was in her hand, though she couldn't remember taking it out. The device felt heavy, foreign, as if it belonged to someone else. You should see her around here, Mike. acting like she's doing us some kind of favor by folding laundry and making coffee. Like that's somehow equivalent to paying rent and groceries. The girl's got no sense of responsibility, no work ethic. Hell, she had that clinic job for what, 8 months? Then surprise, surprise, they had to let her go. The words hit like physical blows. Beverly's vision blurred as Frank's voice continued, each sentence more brutal than the last. The clinic hadn't let her go. Budget cuts had eliminated her position, along with 3 others. She'd been commended for her patient care, recommended for rehire if funding improved. But Frank had transformed her layoff into evidence of personal failure, a story he apparently shared with his brothers as proof of her inadequacy. Sharon thinks I'm being too hard on her, but somebody needs to be realistic. The girl's dead weight, Mike. Dead weight to this family. She shows no signs of getting her life together, no signs of moving out, no signs of anything except making herself comfortable at our expense. Dead weight. The phrase echoed in Beverly's mind as she fumbled with her phone, trying to silence the device before its presence could betray her. Her trembling fingers accidentally pressed the record button. And suddenly, Frank's voice was being captured, preserved, transformed into evidence of exactly how her family truly saw her. I keep thinking about giving her an ultimatum, get it? Job and start contributing, or find somewhere else to live. But Sharon's too soft-hearted, keeps talking about family obligation and how Beverly's been through a rough time. Rough time? Hell, we've all been through rough times. Difference is, most of us don't expect other people to carry us through them. Beverly's legs felt unsteady as Frank's assessment continued, each word burning itself into her memory. Was dead weight. A burden. Someone who expected to be carried rather than someone capable of carrying herself. The worst part is, she acts grateful, you know? Always thanking us, always trying to help around the house. But it's like putting lipstick on a pig, Mike. Doesn't change what you're dealing with. She's 24 years old and living like she's 12. No job, no prospects, no backbone. I swear, sometimes I think we're enabling her by being too nice about the whole situation. Beverly realized she was still recording when Frank's voice grew quieter, more conspiratorial. Between you and me, I think she's gotten too comfortable. She's got free room and board, no real responsibilities, no pressure to actually make something of herself. Why would she change? From her perspective, she's got it made. Let Uncle Frank and Aunt Sharon handle the bills while she plays around on that computer, pretending to look for work. The recording continued for another 3 minutes, as Frank detailed his resentment, his frustration with Sharon's enabling, his certainty that Beverly was taking advantage of their generosity rather than genuinely struggling to rebuild her life. Every cruel observation, every dismissive assumption, every character assassination was preserved in digital clarity. When Frank finally ended the call and turned up the television volume, Beverly remained frozen in the hallway, phone clutched. In her hand, like evidence of a crime, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the magnitude of what she'd just heard. Dead weight. The words followed her as she retreated to her bedroom, closing the door with exaggerated care, too. Avoid any sound that might draw attention. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed, staring at her phone's screen where the recording file waited like a loaded weapon. 43 minutes and 17 seconds of Frank's true opinion. 43 minutes of being reduced to a character in someone else's story of burden and resentment. 43 minutes of discovering that her careful efforts to be helpful, grateful, and unobtrusive had been interpreted as manipulation and entitlement. Beverly played the recording back, forcing herself to listen to Frank's voice cataloging her failures, her weaknesses, her fundamental inadequacy as a human being. Each word was a fresh wound, but also something else: clarity. For 6 months, she'd made excuses for the family's treatment, rationalized their criticism, internalized their disappointment as proof of her own shortcomings. But this recording eliminated any possibility of rationalization. This was Frank's honest assessment, shared with his brother in the privacy he thought he possessed. This was truth, stripped of the polite facades and careful courtesy that usually masked the family's real feelings. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Beverly listened to the recording 3 times before the tears came. Great gasping. Sobs that she muffled with her pillow, grief and rage, and something that might have been relief all tangled together in her chest. She cried for the months of invisible labor, the careful gratitude, the constant effort to prove she deserved the space she occupied. But somewhere between the 3rd and 4th replay, something shifted. Frank's words, meant to diminish her, began to have the opposite effect. Dead weight? She had a job now. She was good at that job. Maria Rodriguez saw potential in her, valued her contributions, believed in her ability to grow and succeed. No backbone? Beverly sat up straighter, wiping tears from her face with the back of her hand. She'd survived her parents' deaths, financial devastation, the loss of her nursing program, unemployment, and 6 months of living with people who saw her as a burden. That wasn't backbone. What was? The recording had captured Frank's cruelty, but it had also captured something else: evidence. Proof of the toxic environment she'd been trying to navigate, documentation of treatment that no one should have to accept. Beverly saved the file with trembling fingers, creating multiple copies across different apps and cloud storage accounts. Whatever came next, she would never again doubt her own perceptions or make excuses for people who saw her struggles as character flaws. Frank thought she was dead weight. Starting Monday, she would prove him wrong. But first, she would make sure his words could never be taken back or denied. Some truths, once spoken, deserve to be preserved. Beverly saved the file with trembling fingers, creating multiple copies across different apps and cloud storage accounts. Whatever came next, she would never again doubt her own perceptions or make excuses for people who saw her struggles as character flaws. She barely slept that night, alternating between replaying Frank's recorded words and staring at the ceiling as dawn crept through her small bedroom window. When her alarm sounded at 6:30 Monday morning, Beverly rose with a clarity she hadn't felt in months. Today marked her 2nd week at Cumberland Regional. Today, she would prove Frank wrong. The morning routine proceeded as usual: coffee, brewing, breakfast prepared, Frank's work shirts pressed to perfection. But something fundamental had shifted. Beverly moved through these tasks with mechanical precision rather than apologetic gratitude. These weren't offerings seeking approval anymore. They were simply the cost of temporary shelter while she rebuilt her life. "You're quiet this morning," Sharon observed, watching Beverly pack her lunch with efficient movements. "Just focused." "On work?" Beverly replied. The words felt different in her mouth, confident rather than defensive. Frank emerged from the bedroom, adjusting his factory uniform, eyeing Beverly with mild suspicion. "Getting a little full of yourself, aren't you? 1 week on the job and suddenly you're too good for conversation?" Beverly looked up from her sandwich preparation, meeting his gaze directly for the first time in months. "I'm not too good for anything, Uncle Frank. I'm just trying to be professional about my responsibilities." Something flickered in Frank's expression: surprise, perhaps even a hint of respect before his familiar scowl returned. "Professional responsibilities, right? Let's see how long this lasts." The drive to Cumberland Regional felt different. Beverly wasn't just escaping the Williams household for 8 hours. She was going somewhere she belonged, somewhere her contributions mattered. The recording had given her something unexpected: freedom from the need to earn Frank's approval or justify her existence. Beverly, perfect timing. Maria Rodriguez called as Beverly entered the administrative offices. "I want you to shadow Jennifer in patient intake today. She's our most experienced coordinator, and I think you're ready for more complex responsibilities." The day flew by in a blur of insurance verifications, appointment scheduling, and patient advocacy. Beverly found herself naturally connecting with anxious patients, translating medical jargon into understandable terms, helping elderly visitors navigate the hospital's maze-like layout. This was what she'd missed most about healthcare work: the human connection, the sense of making a real difference in people's lives. "You've got excellent instincts," Jennifer commented during their lunch break. "Most new hires take weeks to develop the kind of patient rapport you showed this morning. Have you considered pursuing healthcare administration formally?" Beverly felt that familiar flutter of possibility. I was in nursing school before circumstances changed. I've thought about finishing my degree, maybe focusing on the administrative side. Talk to Maria about our continuing education partnerships. The hospital offers tuition assistance for employees pursuing relevant certifications. Might be worth exploring. The conversation planted seeds that Beverly found herself nurturing throughout the afternoon. Professional development, career, advancement. A future built on her own merits rather than other people's charity. She arrived home that evening, carrying herself differently, shoulders straight, stride confident. Tyler was visiting for the weekend, his textbooks spread across the kitchen table as he worked on assignments. "How was day 6 of the working world?" he asked, looking up from his economics homework. "Good. Really good." Beverly hung her jacket on the chair, noting Frank's raised eyebrow at her cheerful tone. "Maria's already talking about additional training opportunities." "Of course she is," Frank muttered from his recliner. "They tell everyone that during the honeymoon period. Give it a month, and you'll be just another cog in the machine." Beverly felt the familiar urge to defend herself, to explain why this time was different. Then Frank's recorded words echoed in her memory. "She shows no signs of getting her life together, no signs of moving out, no signs of anything except making herself comfortable at our expense." Instead of arguing, Beverly simply nodded. "Maybe. You're right, Uncle Frank. I guess we'll see." Sharon emerged from the laundry room with a basket of folded clothes, her expression worried. "Beverly, honey, you've seemed different lately. Distant? Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Aunt Sharon. Better than fine, actually." Beverly accepted the stack of her own clothes, noting how small the pile was compared to the family's. "Garments. I'm just focused on building something stable for myself." "Building something stable?" Frank repeated, his tone mocking. "Listen to her, Sharon. 2 weeks of steady employment, and she thinks she's some kind of career woman." Beverly paused in the doorway, her mother's voice echoing from childhood. Sometimes the best response to cruelty is success. She'd forgotten that lesson during the dark months of unemployment and dependency. Frank's recording had reminded her. "You're right," Beverly said calmly. 2 weeks isn't much, but it's a start, and starting is what matters. Tyler caught her eye across the kitchen, his expression curious and approving. He recognized the change to Beverly was done shrinking herself to fit other people's expectations. That night, Beverly lay in bed listening to Frank and Sharon's muffled conversation through the thin walls. She couldn't make out specific words, but the tone was familiar. Frank's irritation, Sharon's placating responses, the careful dance of a marriage built on avoiding rather than addressing conflict. Beverly opened her phone and found the recording. File, her finger hovering over the play button. She didn't need to listen again. Frank's words were burned into her memory. Dead weight, no backbone, gotten too comfortable. Tomorrow would mark her 3rd week at Cumberland Regional. Next month, she'd inquire about those continuing education opportunities Jennifer had mentioned. By Christmas, she'd have enough saved for a security deposit on her own apartment. Frank thought she had no signs of getting her life together. Beverly smiled in the darkness, already planning her escape from his limited imagination of what she could become. Some people saw dead weight. Maria Rodriguez saw potential. Beverly was finally ready to see it too. Beverly smiled in the darkness, already planning her escape from his limited imagination of what she could become. 3 weeks later, Beverly's transformation was undeniable. She arrived at Cumberland Regional each morning with growing confidence, her interactions with patients smooth and professional. Maria had assigned her increasingly complex responsibilities: insurance appeals, physician scheduling, even training. The newest volunteer coordinator. "I want you to consider applying for our healthcare administration certificate program," Maria said during Beverly's monthly review. "The hospital partners with Eastern Kentucky University for continuing education. We'd cover 70% of the tuition." Beverly felt her pulse quicken. What would that involve? Evening classes, mostly online, with some weekend intensives. It's 18 months to completion, and it would position you for supervisory roles here or at other facilities. Maria leaned forward, her expression earnest.
Out.
"You have natural leadership instincts, Beverly. I'd hate to see that potential wasted." That evening, Beverly researched the program thoroughly, calculating costs and time commitments. For the first time in months, she was planning beyond mere survival. The certificate would cost her $3,000 after the hospital's contribution. Money she could save by Christmas if she maintained her current expenses. "You're glowing," Tyler observed when he called that night. Something good happened. Today, Beverly found herself sharing Maria's offer. Her voice animated in ways that felt foreign after months of careful neutrality. "It's exactly what I need, Ty. Real credentials, real advancement opportunities. That's amazing. Sound like yourself again. Like the Beverly who used to help me with homework and talk about changing the world through nursing. I'm not that naive anymore," Beverly replied, but without bitterness. But maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. At home, the dynamics continued shifting in subtle ways. Beverly contributed her first month's rent, $500 that Frank accepted with grudging acknowledgement. Sharon seemed pleased but nervous, as if Beverly's growing independence somehow threatened the household's careful balance. "Look at you, acting like a real adult," Frank commented when Beverly handed him the money. "Of course, rent's just the beginning. There's utilities, groceries, all the things you've been taking for granted." "I understand," Beverly replied evenly. "I'm planning to contribute more as my income increases." Frank's expression suggested he found this unlikely, but he pocketed the money without further comment. Beverly's world was expanding beyond the Williams household in ways she hadn't anticipated. Connor Davis, the EMT she'd noticed during her first week, had begun timing his breaks to coincide with hers. Their conversations started professionally discussions about patient transfers and medical protocols, but gradually became more personal. "You're different from when you started," Connor observed one Thursday afternoon, as they shared coffee in the hospital cafeteria. "More present, I guess. Like you're actually here instead of just going through the motions." Beverly considered this assessment. "I suppose I am more present. For a while I was just surviving. Now I'm remembering what it feels like to actually live." Connor's smile was warm, uncomplicated. "That's good to hear. You want to grab dinner sometime? Away from the hospital, I mean? Like actual people instead of medical professionals." The invitation sent a flutter of nervous excitement through Beverly's chest. Dating felt like a luxury she'd abandoned, along with most other aspects of normal adult life. But Connor's interest seemed genuine, untainted by pity or obligation. "I'd like that," she heard herself saying. "This weekend, maybe." When Beverly mentioned her dinner plans to Sharon the next evening, the reaction was immediate and telling. "You're dating already?" Sharon's voice carried a note of panic. "Beverly, honey, don't you think you should focus on getting established before complicating things?" Frank looked up from his newspaper, expression skeptical, admitting, "Right, this Connor fellow know about your situation. Your living arrangements." Beverly felt heat rising in her cheeks. "My situation is that I'm a 24-year-old woman with a job and prospects for advancement. I don't see why that would concern anyone I date." "Prospects," Frank repeated with his familiar snort. "Beverly, you've been employed for 3 weeks. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here." The condescension in his tone triggered something Beverly had been suppressing since the night she'd recorded his phone conversation. "You're right, Uncle Frank. 3 weeks isn't very long. But it's longer than 0, which is where I was a month ago. And every day I work is a day closer to complete independence." Frank's eyes narrowed. "Independence? You think having a entry-level hospital job makes you independent? Still living under my roof, eating food I pay for, using utilities I'm responsible for? Which is why I'm paying rent now. I'm planning to contribute more as my income increases." Beverly's voice remained steady despite her racing pulse. "I'm not asking anyone to support me indefinitely," good Frank said, returning to his paper, "because charity has its limits, even family charity." Beverly escaped to her room, hands shaking slightly as she closed the door. Frank's dismissive attitude no longer surprised her. She'd heard his true opinion in devastating detail. But his casual cruelty still had the power to wound, especially when delivered in front of Sharon, who offered no contradiction or support. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to Tyler's contact information. Her cousin had become her primary source of family validation, the one person who seemed to recognize her progress rather than questioning its sustainability. Dad being his usual encouraging self? Tyler asked when she called. Like that. Beverly settled onto her bed, suddenly exhausted. Sometimes I wonder if I'm fooling myself. Maybe 3 weeks of employment isn't worth celebrating. Beverly, stop. 3 weeks ago, you were applying for jobs and getting rejected. Now you have steady income. Your supervisor thinks you're leadership material, and some guy wants to take you to dinner? That's not fooling yourself, that's succeeding. Tyler's confidence in her transformation felt like a lifeline. When did you become the wise one in this family? It's probably around the time I started seeing how they treat you and recognizing it's not normal. Families are supposed to celebrate each other's successes, not tear them down. After ending the call, Beverly sat in the growing darkness, processing Tyler's words. Her cousin was right. Normal families celebrated successes rather than undermining them. Normal families offered encouragement rather than constant reminders of past failures. Beverly opened her phone's voice memo app and began recording. Not accidentally this time, but deliberately. October 28th. It's been 1 month. Since I started at Cumberland Regional, Maria offered me the chance to pursue healthcare administration certification. Connor asked me out. I paid rent for the first time in 6 months. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Frank thinks I'm getting ahead of myself, that 3 weeks of employment doesn't mean anything. Maybe he's right about the timeline. He's wrong about what it means. It means I'm not dead weight anymore. It means I'm building something. She saved the recording, filing it alongside Frank's unknowing confession. Evidence of where she'd been, proof of where she was going. Tomorrow, she would accept Maria's recommendation for the certificate program. This weekend, she would have dinner with Connor, and someday soon, she would have enough saved to move out of the Williams household entirely. Frank could keep his charity. Beverly was learning to provide for herself. Frank could keep his charity. Beverly was learning to provide for herself. The dinner with Connor exceeded Beverly's cautious expectations. He chose a small Italian restaurant in downtown Harlan. It's a kind of place where conversations could develop naturally, without the pressure of excessive formality or expense. Connor proved to be thoughtful company, asking genuine questions about her work, sharing stories from his EMT calls, treating her like someone worth knowing rather than someone who needed fixing. Oh. So you're thinking about the administration program? Connor asked over shared tiramisu. That's ambitious. Good ambitious. It feels ambitious, Beverly admitted.
How?
6 months ago, I couldn't even imagine being employed again, let alone pursuing additional education.
What changed?
Connor's question was gentle, inviting rather than intrusive. Beverly considered how much to reveal. I suppose I remembered that other people's limitations don't have to become my own. Just because someone sees you as helpless doesn't mean you are helpless. Connor nodded as if he understood the weight behind her words. My grandmother used to say that some people will try to keep you small because your growth makes them uncomfortable. With their own choices, observation resonated deeply. Beverly found herself wondering if Frank's constant undermining stemmed from his own fears about stagnation, his own discomfort with change and possibility. Their relationship developed gradually over the following weeks. Connor invited Beverly. 2 community events, a fall festival, a charity 5K, church services at the small Methodist congregation where his family had attended for generations. Each invitation expanded Beverly's world beyond the hospital and the Williams household, reminding her that normal adult life included social connections, recreational activities, and relationships based on mutual interest rather than obligation. You seem lighter lately, Ruby Mae Johnson observed one Saturday morning as Beverly collected mail from the cluster box at the end of the Williams driveway. The elderly neighbor had been watching Beverly's transformation with keen interest, occasionally offering subtle encouragement through small gestures, fresh vegetables from her garden, recommendations for professional clothing at the local thrift store. I feel lighter, Beverly replied honestly. Like I'm remembering who I used to be before everything fell apart. Honey, you're not remembering who you used to be. You're discovering who you're becoming. Ruby Mae's weathered face creased into a knowing smile. There's a difference. What you used to be got knocked down by circumstances. What you're becoming is being built on solid ground. The distinction felt profound. Beverly wasn't trying to reclaim her pre-crisis identity. She was constructing something new from the lessons learned during her lowest point. At work, Beverly's confidence continued growing. Maria formally submitted her application for the healthcare administration program, and Beverly was accepted with a partial scholarship based on her employment performance and academic potential. The classes would begin in January, creating a clear timeline for professional advancement. "I'm proud of you," Maria said during their weekly check-in. "Not just for the academic acceptance, but for how you've transformed this position. You came in as someone who needed a job, and you've become someone we can't imagine losing." Beverly felt tears threatening at the unexpected validation. "Thank you for seeing potential when I couldn't see it myself. That's what good supervisors do, but you did the hard work of proving that potential was real." At home, however, the family's response to Beverly's expanding world became increasingly strained. Frank's comments grew sharper as Beverly's independence became more apparent. Her evening classes, weekend social activities, and relationship with Connor were treated as evidence of ingratitude rather than healthy adult development. "Mighty convenient how Beverly's never around for family time anymore," Frank observed. When Beverly declined to join their traditional Sunday afternoon television watching in favor of studying for her first certificate class. "I'm working on assignments," Beverly explained, gathering her materials from the kitchen table. "The program is intensive." "Program," Frank repeated with disdain. "Back in my day, you learned on the job. All this fancy education is just an excuse to avoid real responsibility." Sharon attempted to mediate, her voice carrying the familiar strain of someone trying to keep peace. "Frank, Beverly's trying to better herself. Isn't that what we want?" "What I want is for people to appreciate what they have, instead of constantly reaching for more." Beverly's got a perfectly good job, a roof over her head, family support, but apparently that's not enough anymore. Beverly looked up from her textbook, meeting Frank's glare directly. "You're right that I have a good job and family support. I'm grateful for both. But wanting to advance professionally isn't the same as being ungrateful. It's being responsible for my own future. It's responsible for your own future." Frank's voice. "Rose, you want to be responsible? Start by paying your fair share around here instead of treating this place like a boarding house while you play student." The accusation stung because it contained enough truth to feel genuinely unfair. Beverly did spend less time on household maintenance since starting work in school. She had been prioritizing her professional development over unpaid domestic labor. But Frank's framing made her growth sound selfish rather than necessary. "I've been paying rent and contributing to groceries," Beverly replied evenly. "If you think I should contribute more, we can discuss specific amounts." "This isn't about money," Frank snapped. "It's about attitude. It's about remembering where you came from and who helped you when you had nothing." The conversation echoed themes from Frank's recorded phone call, the assumption that Beverly's circumstances reflected character defects rather than economic realities, the belief that gratitude required permanent subordination. "I do remember," Beverly said quietly. "I remember everything." Something in her tone made Frank pause, his expression uncertain. But the moment passed quickly, and he returned to his familiar pattern of dismissive authority. "Just don't forget that all this education and career advancement doesn't mean much if you can't maintain basic family relationships. Pride goes before a fall, Beverly. Remember that." Beverly gathered her study materials and retreated to her room, heart pounding with suppressed anger. Frank's warnings about pride felt like threats, predictions that her success would inevitably lead to failure, that reaching for more would result in losing what she had. But Ruby May's words echoed stronger than Frank's warnings. "What you're becoming is being built on solid ground." Beverly opened her laptop and reviewed her class schedule, her work commitments, her savings account balance. Solid ground indeed. Each day brought her closer to complete independence, closer to a life where Frank's approval was irrelevant to her sense of worth. She was building something real, something that couldn't be taken away by other people's fears or limitations. Frank could keep his predictions of failure. Beverly was too busy succeeding to listen. Frank could keep his predictions of failure. Beverly was too busy succeeding to listen. Winter arrived early in eastern Kentucky, bringing with it Beverly's First semester of evening classes and a deepening relationship with Connor that began to feel like something with genuine potential. Their twice-weekly dinners had evolved into weekend activities, hiking the local trails, attending Connor's family gatherings. Quiet evenings at his apartment where Beverly could study without the undercurrent of tension that permeated the Williams household. You should meet my parents properly, Connor mentioned one December evening as they walked through downtown Harlan's modest Christmas display. Not just the quick introductions at church. Come to Sunday dinner this week. Beverly felt the familiar flutter of anxiety that accompanied any expansion of her social world. Are you sure? I mean, we've only been dating for 2 months. Beverly. My mom's been asking about you since our second date. She wants to meet the woman who's made me smile this much. Connor's expression grew more serious. Unless you're not ready for that, I don't want to push. Consideration in his voice reminded Beverly how different this relationship felt from her previous experiences. Connor asked rather than assumed, invited rather than demanded. His family's interests seemed genuine rather than judgmental. I'd like that, Beverly heard herself saying. What should I bring? Just yourself. Trust me, they're going to love you. The following Sunday at the Davis family table, Beverly experienced something she'd almost forgotten: unconditional welcome. Connor's parents treated her inclusion as natural, asking about her work and studies with genuine interest rather than skeptical evaluation. His younger sister Emma bombarded Beverly with questions about hospital procedures. Fascinated by the medical world Beverly navigated daily. Connor tells us you're pursuing healthcare administration, Mrs. Davis said as they cleared dessert plates. That's wonderful. We need more people in healthcare who understand patient care from the ground up. It's challenging, Beverly admitted. Balancing work and classes while trying to save money for my own place. You're still living with family? Mr. Davis asked, his tone curious rather than judgmental. My uncle and aunt took me in when I lost my job last year. They've been generous, but I'm looking forward to independence. Beverly kept her voice neutral, though Connor's understanding glance suggested he heard the complexity beneath her diplomatic words. Independence is important, Mrs. Davis agreed. But so is knowing you have people who support your dreams. You seem to have found both. Driving home that evening, Beverly felt the contrast between the Davis family's warmth and the Williams household's careful coldness more acutely than ever. Connor's family saw her ambitions as admirable. Her own relatives treated them as evidence of ingratitude. That was wonderful, Beverly told Connor as they sat in his truck outside the Williams house. Your family is normal? Connor supplied gently. Beverly, I hope you know that what you've described about your living situation isn't typical. Families should celebrate each other's successes, not undermine them. The observation hung between them as Beverly processed its implications. Connor had never directly criticized her relatives, but his careful questions and concerned expressions suggested he recognized dysfunction. Beverly had learned to accept as normal. I know it's complicated, Beverly said finally. They did take me in when I had nowhere else to go. I owe them gratitude for that. Gratitude? Yes, but not your entire future. Connor's voice was gentle but firm. You don't owe anyone the right to diminish your accomplishments or discourage your growth. Inside the house, Beverly found Frank waiting in the kitchen, his expression thunderous. Bit late, aren't you? He asked, though Beverly's curfew had never been explicitly established. I had dinner with Connor's family. I mentioned it yesterday. Connor's family. Frank's tone invested the words with significance Beverly couldn't decipher. Spend more time with them than you do here. Starting to wonder where your loyalties lie. Beverly set down her purse carefully, recognizing the dangerous territory they were entering. My loyalties lie with the people who support my goals and respect my choices, just like anyone else's would. Support your goals, Frank repeated mockingly. Beverly, honey, you're 24 years old, working an entry-level job and playing house with some boy you've known for 2 months. These aren't goals. They're distractions from real responsibility. Real responsibility like what? Beverly's voice rose despite her efforts to remain calm. Like spending every evening doing unpaid housework instead of investing in my education? Like choosing family obligation over professional advancement? Real responsibility, like remembering who helped you when you were nobody and had nothing. Like appreciating what you have, instead of constantly reaching for more. Frank stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Like recognizing that all this progress you think you're making could disappear just as fast as it appeared. The threat was barely veiled. Beverly understood that Frank was warning her about the fragility of her current situation, how quickly her job, her education, her relationship could be undermined if she didn't maintain proper gratitude and subordination. Are you threatening me, Uncle Frank? I'm educating you about reality? This Connor fellow, this fancy education, this career woman act, it's all built on a foundation you don't control. It's one budget cut, one personality conflict, one bad performance review, and you're right back where you started. Only this time, the people who helped you before might not be so generous. Beverly felt something cold and hard crystallizing in her chest. Frank wasn't offering protection or guidance. He was outlining exactly how he would sabotage her independence if she pushed too far beyond acceptable boundaries. I understand, Beverly said quietly. Thank you for clarifying where we stand. Frank's expression suggested he thought he'd won this exchange, that Beverly had been properly reminded of her place and her dependence. He had no way of knowing that Beverly was remembering his recorded words, understanding now that his hostility wasn't protective concern but active malice. Good. Maybe now you can focus on being part of this family instead of treating us like a hotel while you build your fancy new life. Beverly nodded and retreated to her room, where she sat on her bed and opened her laptop. Her savings account showed nearly $2,000, enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on a modest apartment. Her job was secure, her academic performance strong, her relationship with Connor healthy and supportive. Frank thought he held power over her future. He had no idea that Beverly had been methodically constructing her escape route for months. The only question now was whether she'd have to use the recording to defend herself when she finally walked away, or if Frank would reveal his true nature all on his own. Based on tonight's conversation, Beverly suspected she wouldn't have to wait long to find out. Based on tonight's conversation, Beverly suspected she wouldn't have to wait long to find out. The confrontation came 2 weeks later, triggered by what should have been a moment of celebration. Beverly had received her grades for the first semester 2 A's and 1 A-. It's placing her in the top 10% of her cohort. Maria had responded to the news by offering Beverly a promotion to administrative coordinator, with a salary increase that would accelerate her timeline for independent living. Beverly was sharing the news with Connor over lunch when Tyler called, excited about his own semester's end and eager to hear about Beverly's academic success. Their conversation lasted 20 minutes. It's filled with mutual encouragement and plans for Beverly to visit Tyler's campus the following month. She arrived home that evening to find Frank waiting in the kitchen, his posture rigid with barely contained anger. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. Beverly set down her work bag, noting Sharon's absence and the ominous quiet that suggested this confrontation had been planned. "About what?" "About your priorities. About the fact that you spent 20 minutes today telling Tyler all about your promotion and your grades and your wonderful new life. But you haven't said word one to the people who made it all possible." Beverly felt a flicker of confusion. "I was planning to share the news at dinner. I just got home. Were you? Because it seems like everyone else gets to hear about Beverly's amazing success before the family that's been supporting you does. Tyler knows, Connor knows, your boss knows, but the people paying your rent and putting food in your mouth were apparently last on the list." The accusation was so fundamentally unfair that Beverly struggled to formulate a response. She shared news with Tyler because he was supportive and encouraging. She shared it with Connor because he was her boyfriend. She shared it with Maria because Maria was her supervisor. The timing had nothing to do with prioritizing anyone over her relatives. "That's not how it happened," Beverly said carefully. "I called Tyler because he'd asked about my grades. Connor was with me when I got the promotion news. I was going to tell you and Aunt Sharon together at dinner." "Sure you were." Frank's voice dripped skepticism. "Just like you were going to tell us about all those cozy family dinners at Connor's house. Just like you were going to mention how you've been bad-mouthing us to anyone who'll listen." Beverly's blood went cold. What are you talking about? What am I talking about? I'm talking about Ruby May. Johnson mentioning to Sharon that you seem so much happier now that you're finding your own way, getting away from difficult family situations. I'm talking about Pastor Mitchell asking Sharon if everything's all right at home because you've been sharing some concerning things in that young professionals group. Beverly felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. She had been circumspect in her conversations with both Ruby May and Pastor Mitchell, but apparently even carefully neutral comments about family dynamics had been interpreted as betrayal. I've never bad-mouthed anyone. I've been discreet about family matters. Discreet? Frank's voice rose. Beverly, half the town thinks we're abusing you based on whatever sob story you've been spreading around. You want to talk about embarrassing? The family? You want to talk about being ungrateful? This is it right here. Beverly realized with growing horror that Frank had constructed an entire narrative around her social connections, interpreting her expanding world as a deliberate campaign to damage the Williams family's reputation. Every friendship, every confidence, every moment of normal adult socialization had been reframed as treachery. Frank, that's not what happened. People have noticed that I'm doing better, and they're happy for me. That's not the same as bad-mouthing anyone. Is that? What'd you call it? Because from where I sit, it looks like you've been playing the victim to get sympathy and support from people who don't know the real story. What real story? Beverly's voice rose despite her efforts to remain calm. The story where you took me in when I had nowhere else to go? I've never hidden that. I've been grateful for your help from day one. Grateful. Frank's laugh was harsh. Beverly, if you were grateful, you wouldn't be running around town acting like we're some kind of burden you can't wait to escape. If you were grateful, you'd remember that everything you have right now, your job, your education, your boyfriend exists because we gave you a foundation to build from. Beverly felt something snap inside her chest. The months of careful navigation, diplomatic responses, and swallowed criticism suddenly felt intolerable. You're right, she said quietly. You did give me a foundation, but not the kind you think. Frank's expression shifted, sensing danger in Beverly's changed tone. What's that supposed to mean? Beverly reached for her phone, her hands steadier than they'd been in months. It means I know exactly what kind of foundation you've provided, and I have proof. She opened the recording app, found the file she'd saved months earlier, and pressed play. Frank's voice filled the kitchen, tinny, but unmistakable. I'm telling you, Mike, it's been 6 months of this. 6 months of her eating our food, using our utilities, giving us nothing but worry and embarrassment. Frank's face went white as his own words continued pouring from Beverly's phone. Every cruel observation, every dismissive assessment, every moment of casual cruelty preserved in digital clarity. The girl's dead weight, Mike. Dead weight to this family. Beverly let the recording play for a full minute before stopping it. The silence afterward feeling profound and dangerous. So yes, Uncle Frank, you gave me a foundation. Gave me absolute clarity about how my family really sees me. That clarity has been incredibly motivating. Frank stared at the phone as if it were a weapon pointed at his chest. You recorded me. You violated my privacy in my own home. I accidentally recorded a conversation you had in a shared living space. A conversation where you detailed exactly how worthless and burdensome you consider me to be. Beverly's voice remained steady, though her heart was hammering. I've carried this for months, Frank. Every time you criticized my job search, my work performance, my relationship, my education, I knew it wasn't constructive guidance. It was sabotage. Sharon appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices, her face confused and worried. What's going on? What was that recording? Beverly looked at her aunt, seeing clearly for the first time the woman who had enabled Frank's cruelty through years of passive acceptance. It was your husband explaining to his brother how I'm dead weight to this family. How I contribute nothing and show no signs of getting my life together. How you're too soft-hearted to give me the ultimatum I deserve. Sharon's face crumpled as the implications sank in. Frank, you didn't say those things. Tell me you didn't say those things. But Frank's defensive silence was answer enough. Beverly had finally played her ace. The question now was whether the truth would set her free or destroy what remained of her family relationships. Given Frank's expression, she suspected it might be both. Beverly had finally played her ace. The question now was whether the truth would set her free or destroy what remained of her family relationships. Given Frank's expression, she suspected it might be both. The kitchen fell into a silence so complete that Beverly could hear the old refrigerator's hum and the distant sound of traffic on the county road. Sharon stood in the doorway, her face cycling through disbelief, hurt, and dawning comprehension. Frank remained frozen, staring at Beverly's phone as if willing the recording to somehow unhappen. "Frank," Sharon's voice was barely a whisper. "How could you say those things?" Frank's face flushed red as he found his voice. "It was a private conversation with my brother. I had a right to express my frustrations without being secretly recorded like some kind of criminal." "Your frustrations?" Beverly felt a laugh building in her chest, sharp and bitter. "Is that what you call it? Describing me as dead weight? Who contributes nothing, was just venting frustration? You want the truth, Beverly? Fine, I'll give you truth." Frank's voice rose, his earlier shock transforming into aggressive defensiveness. "You showed up here 6 months ago with nothing. No job, no money, no plan. We took you in because family helps family, but instead of being grateful, you've spent every day since then acting like you're too good for us." Sharon stepped further. Into the kitchen, her expression horrified. "Frank, stop. Just stop. No, Sharon, she wants to play recordings and talk about truth. Let's have truth." Frank turned back to Beverly, his voice dripping with resentment. "You think getting one job and taking some classes makes you better than us? You think dating some boy and playing career woman erases the fact that without our charity, you'd be homeless?" Beverly felt the familiar weight of Frank's words trying to settle on her shoulders. The practiced manipulation that had kept her grateful and apologetic for months. But the recording had changed everything. She knew now that Frank's cruelty wasn't protective tough love, it was deliberate sabotage designed to keep her dependent and diminished. "You're right about one thing," Beverly said quietly. "Without your help, my situation would have been much more difficult, and I have been grateful for that help, despite how you really feel about providing it. Have you? Because gratitude doesn't look like running around town bad-mouthing the people. Who saved you? I haven't bad-mouthed anyone. But I also won't pretend anymore that criticism disguised as concern is actually helpful. I won't pretend that being called dead weight was somehow for my own good." Tyler's voice came from the kitchen doorway. "Startling everyone, Dad. What the hell is wrong with you?" Beverly turned to see her cousin standing with his weekend bag, his face a mixture of confusion and anger. He'd apparently arrived in time to hear at least part of the confrontation. "Tyler, this is between adults," Frank began, but Tyler cut him off. "Adults? You call secretly resenting Beverly while pretending to help her adult behavior? You call making her feel like garbage in her own family adult behavior? This isn't your concern, son. It absolutely is my concern. Beverly's family. She's been through hell, and instead of supporting her, you've been..." Tyler stopped, shaking his head in disgust. "I heard what you said on that recording, Dad. Dead weight. She's working full-time, going to school, paying rent, and you call her dead weight?" Frank's face darkened. "You don't understand the full situation." "I understand enough. I understand that Beverly has been apologizing for taking up space in this house while working her ass off to rebuild her life. I understand that she's been grateful for help that came with a side of constant criticism and resentment." Beverly felt tears threatening at Tyler's unexpected fierce advocacy. For months, he'd offered quiet support and encouragement. Now he was openly confronting his father on her behalf. "Tyler's right," Sharon said suddenly, her voice stronger than Beverly had ever heard it. "Frank, what you said about Beverly was cruel. She's been nothing but helpful and respectful since she's been here, and you've been looking for reasons to tear her down?" Frank's expression suggested he was being attacked from all sides. "So now I'm the villain? I'm the bad guy for having realistic expectations and honest conversations with my brother? Honest conversations?" Beverly reached for her phone again. "Should I play more of it, Frank?" The part where you discuss wanting to give me an ultimatum? The part where you complain that I'm too comfortable and need pressure to actually make something of myself? Beverly, don't, Sharon said quickly. I've heard enough. Have you? Beverly looked at her aunt, seeing years of passive enabling in Sharon's careful neutrality. Because this conversation didn't happen in a vacuum. This has been Frank's attitude toward me for months, and you've watched it happen without saying a word. Sharon's face crumpled. I knew he was frustrated, but I didn't know. I never heard him say anything like what was on that recording. But you saw how he treated me. You watched him dismiss my job applications, question my work performance, undermine my confidence at every opportunity. You said nothing. I thought he was just worried about you. I thought he was trying to motivate you in his own way. Beverly felt a moment of sympathy for Sharon. Recognizing a woman who had spent years avoiding conflict by rationalizing her husband's cruelty. But sympathy didn't erase the months of isolation Beverly had endured while Sharon chose comfortable. Denial over difficult confrontation. I'm moving out, Beverly announced, the decision crystallizing as she spoke. I have enough saved for a security deposit and first month's rent. I'll be gone by the end of the week. Beverly, wait. Sharon stepped forward, her expression panicked. Don't make decisions when everyone's angry. We can work this out. Work what out, exactly? Frank's made his feelings clear, and I've finally stopped making excuses for them. This isn't a misunderstanding that can be resolved with better communication. Tyler moved to stand beside Beverly, his stance protective. I think Beverly's making the right choice, and for what it's worth, I'll help you move. Whatever you need. Frank looked between his son and Beverly, his expression shifting from anger to something that might have been alarm. Tyler, you don't understand the complexities here. I understand that Beverly deserves to live somewhere she's wanted and respected. If that's not here, then she should definitely leave. Beverly felt a surge of gratitude toward Tyler, whose support meant more than he could possibly know. She also recognized that his advocacy would have consequences in this household long after she was gone. I don't want to cause problems between you and your parents, Beverly told Tyler quietly. You're not causing problems. You're finally refusing to accept being treated like one. Tyler's voice was firm. And honestly, it's about time someone in this family stood up for what's right. Beverly looked around the kitchen that had been her temporary refuge, seeing it now as the battleground it had always been. Frank sat in sullen silence. Sharon wrung her hands in distress, and Tyler stood ready to defend her against his own family. She'd found her answer about where loyalties should lie. It belonged with people who celebrated your growth rather than resenting it, who supported your dreams rather than undermining them. Beverly was finally ready to choose her own family, even if it meant leaving her biological one behind. Beverly was finally ready to choose her own family, even if it meant leaving her biological one behind. 6 months later, Beverly stood in her small apartment kitchen, arranging flowers Connor had brought to celebrate her completion of the Healthcare Administration Certificate Program. The space was modest, a one-bedroom unit in a converted house near downtown Harlan, but it was entirely hers. No walking on eggshells, no apologetic gratitude required, no careful navigation of someone else's emotional landmines. The apartment told the story of her transformation in tangible details. Framed certificates hung on the living room wall, her CNA license, her new healthcare administration credential, and a letter of commendation from Maria for excellence in patient advocacy. The bookshelf held textbooks alongside novels she'd finally had time to read for pleasure. Photos captured moments of genuine happiness. Dinner with Connor's family, graduation from her certificate program, a hiking trip with Tyler where they'd both looked relaxed and genuinely joyful. You sure you're ready for this? Connor asked, checking the dining table setup one more time. Beverly had invited the people who'd supported her journey to celebrate her certification completion and her promotion to administrative supervisor at Cumberland Regional. More than ready, Beverly replied, adjusting the centerpiece. I want to thank the people who saw potential when I couldn't see it myself. The guest list represented Beverly's chosen family, Maria Rodriguez, whose mentorship had been instrumental in Beverly's professional development. Pastor James Mitchell, who'd provided guidance without judgment during Beverly's darkest moments. Ruby Mae Johnson, whose practical wisdom had helped Beverly recognize toxic dynamics and find her own strength. Tyler, whose loyalty had never wavered despite family pressure, and Connor, whose steady support had shown Beverly what healthy relationships could look like. Maria arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine and genuine warmth. "I'm so proud of you," she said, embracing Beverly in the doorway. "When I think about where you were 8 months ago, compared to where you are now, I couldn't have done it without your guidance," Beverly replied, meaning every word. "Taking a chance on me when I could barely take a chance on myself, that changed everything." "I didn't take a chance," Maria corrected gently. "I recognized what was already there, just needed the right environment to let it flourish." Pastor James arrived next, followed by Ruby May, who surveyed Beverly's apartment with approval. "Look at this place," Ruby May declared. "Clean, organized, peaceful. This is what happens when you stop letting other people's chaos become your normal." Tyler arrived carrying a small wrapped gift and wearing a smile. Beverly hadn't seen during family gatherings at the Williams house. "Bev, this place is perfect. It feels like you." "What does that mean?" Beverly asked, accepting his hug. "Feels calm, confident, like someone lives here who knows they deserve good things." Connor appeared with takeout from the Italian restaurant where they'd had their first official date, completing the circle of people who'd helped Beverly rebuild her life on her own terms. As they settled around Beverly's small dining table, the conversation flowed with the easy warmth of people who genuinely cared about each other's well-being. Maria shared updates about the hospital's expansion plans and Beverly's role in the new patient services department. Pastor James mentioned the scholarship fund the church was establishing for young people pursuing healthcare careers, inspired partly by Beverly's story of transformation through education and support. "I have something to share," Tyler announced. As they cleared the main course, I've been accepted to a summer internship program in Louisville. It means I'll be away from home for 3 months, but it's exactly the kind of experience I need for my business degree. "That's wonderful," Beverly said, noting the slight tension in Tyler's expression. "Your parents must be proud." Tyler's pause was telling. "Mom's supportive dad. Dad thinks I'm getting too big for my britches. Sound familiar?" The reference to Frank's pattern of undermining family members' growth hung in the air briefly before Ruby May spoke up. "Some people can't stand to see others succeed because it forces them to confront their own choices," she observed. "The key is not letting their limitations become your limitations." Beverly nodded, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. Frank's recorded words had been devastating when she'd first heard them, but they'd also been liberating. It eliminated her ability to rationalize his treatment or make excuses for behavior that was fundamentally destructive. "I used to think family meant accepting whatever treatment came with the relationship," Beverly said. "But family should be the people who celebrate your growth, who support your dreams, who see your potential, even when you can't see it yourself." She gestured around the table. "Everyone here has been more family to me than some of my actual relatives. You've shown me what healthy relationships look like." Connor reached for her hand under the table, his touch warm and reassuring. "You've shown us what courage looks like. Building a new life from scratch while maintaining your integrity and compassion, that's not easy." "It wasn't easy, Beverly." "Agreed. But it was necessary. I couldn't keep living as someone else's definition of who I should be." As the evening wound down and her guests prepared to leave, Beverly felt a deep sense of contentment she'd almost forgotten was possible. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, and she glanced at it casually before freezing. The message was from Sharon. "Beverly, I know it's been 6 months, but I wanted you to know I'm proud of what you've accomplished. Frank won't admit he was wrong, but I know he was. I hope someday we can have a relationship that's healthier for both of us. You deserved better from us." Beverly showed the message to Tyler, who read it with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "What will you do?" he asked. Beverly considered the question carefully. "I'll respond kindly, but carefully. Sharon made choices during the months I lived there, and acknowledging Frank's behavior now doesn't erase the impact of her silence then. But people can change, and I'm open to seeing if she's serious about building something healthier." Well, as Connor helped her clean up after the last guest left, Beverly reflected on the woman she'd become. She was no longer the person who'd arrived at the Williams house 6 months ago, desperate, grateful for any shelter, willing to accept mistreatment as the price of survival. She was Beverly Thompson, administrative supervisor at Cumberland Regional Medical Center. Beverly Thompson, healthcare administration certificate holder with plans to pursue her bachelor's degree. Beverly Thompson, who had her own apartment, healthy relationships, and a future built on her own merits rather than other people's charity. Most importantly, she was Beverly Thompson, who knew her own worth and refused to accept anything less than respect from the people in her life. Frank had called her dead weight. Beverly smiled as she looked around her apartment, thinking about her promotion, her education, her relationships, her independence. Dead weight didn't build a life like this. Dead weight didn't inspire others or create positive change or transform pain into strength. Beverly had proven that she was anything but dead weight. She was a woman who'd learned to carry herself with dignity, purpose, and unshakable self-respect. And that, she realized, was the greatest victory of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.